Hello, everybody, and welcome to Mio on MMA podcast. I have no card to break down this week. There's no UFC card. There's no major offering from the sort of B tier promotions. There is an LFA card. It does look pretty cool. It's a bunch of Brazilian talent. Another venture down to South America, and yeah, it'll probably be pretty good. But there's not enough really there to make a full episode out of in terms of analyzing the fights. So I'm gonna go do the sort of viewer questions slash what's going on in MMA right now slash really depressing stuff, because honestly, there's not a lot of positives happening. Like, I could talk about Francis Ngannou's contract and how it could shape the business, and I will. But largely, we have Mackenzie Dern's divorce details, which are messy. I'm not really going to go any further into that particular topic, other than to say it would appear the relationship was highly toxic, and it is probably better, apparently, for her fighting career based on the Angela Hill fight, and for her life that she moves on to the next chapter. Hopefully the kid is going to be fine. This is just saying the general like child divorce thing. Hopefully this doesn't impact that long term. Hopefully this is a growing experience rather than a crushing one. And yeah, that's really all I have to say on that one. Little surprising because they did seem so happy, but oh well. Unfortunately, this is a recurring theme in MMA because we had, of course, Angela Lee, we had Rachel Ostovich. It's happened a couple of times, and it's not great. It's not lovely. And of course, also on the marriage front, is Tim Elliott and Gina Mazzani. I'm not touching that one. If you want some really depressing stuff, go you can go search that one out and how that marriage has fallen apart. But on the big scale things, we have Francis Ngannou's contract. I'm going to talk about that. The UFC's financials, because we have a relatively fresh set of those. There's a lot of conversation going on vis-a-vis their 33% profit margin, essentially. And also a little bit about USADA. I'll have a little bit about USADA, maybe. Just because we have some numbers for how much it costs and whatever. And I also want to talk about the Aljamain Sterling circumstances. But before I get into that, I want to talk about the lovely cross section of stupid political and social takes and MMA. Now I want to make something abundantly clear here, very clear. I do not crap on fighters because of their political views, because they disagree with mine. Because frankly, realistically speaking, you probably can't find an MMA fighter with my specific concoction of political views, because everyone's particular political views fit into a fairly unique, fairly narrow canyon. For example, if you watch a political streamer or podcast or whatever, you will find something you disagree with them on. You do not reflect their values 100%. And there are plenty of fighters that I have said nothing about their political views that I horrendously disagree with. Like, believe me, during the Donald Trump election cycles, we have seen a lot of MMA fighters come out of the woodwork as, Trump supporters. And I full-heartedly am not that. But I don't care. They're fighters. They're individuals. They have their own particular points of view. Whatever. Who you voted for, I don't care about. And what I mean about this is I'm getting into Jake Shields, Colby Covington, and Nate Marquardt, who are all, tremendously right-wing people, but I'm not talking about them because they're right-wing people. Talking about Colby Covington real quick here. A lot of people will say, like, all right, Colby Covington's just a character, just an act. He's actually a really nice guy. He's a really awesome dude. Someone even tried to pull this where, like, yeah, Chael Sonnen and Colby Covington, great people. Chael Sonnen has been, like, charged with a bunch of, like, white-collar crimes and other related, like, legal shit. He's not he is not a nice person or a someone you should use as a role model. I want to make that 100% clear. And the fact that, Colby Covington is kind of like Chael with more Donald Trump thrown on, like a Chael that reflects the times, I guess. It's kind of the same thing. There's plenty of stuff where like Colby Covington, probably not a super nice person. Whatever. There's plenty of teammates that have stated things before he started doing the act, after he started doing the act, whatever. That like, no, he's not super nice, whatever. My problem with his act, and this has always been my problem with his act, is that let's say for a moment that Colby Covington believes nothing he's pushing. Absolutely nothing. It's complete act. And it might be. Dude is not convincing without sunglasses on as far as cutting a promo, to use wrestling parlance. Whenever you see him speak without his sunglasses on, his eyes are incredibly nervous, trying to remember a script, whatever. I fully believe a lot of it is bullshit. But here is the problem. Number one, because his character is so politically charged, it actually is utilized by like right-wing media talking points and whatever. Like, so even if he doesn't believe it's nothing, whatever, it's meant to be a pro wrestling gimmick, I guess, whatever. There are people that don't see it that way and use it to equivocate for actual political messaging that, in my opinion, is harmful. Now, granted, that's my opinion. Those might be your ideas. You're fine. But then own it. Own that this has, like, consequences. Good or bad, but consequences because of how charged it is. And two, and this is going to sound weird because, like, I am a pro wrestling fan. Like, I grew up watching pro wrestling. I enjoyed it. My earliest memories of pro wrestling was a tag team match between the Blue Brothers, a.k.a. Ron and Don Harris, the Nazi twins, and 1-2-3 Kid, a.k.a. Sean Waltman, and Savio Vega. Like, that is my earliest memory of pro wrestling. So we're talking, like, early 90s here. I'm still a pro wrestling fan. I watch New Japan Wrestling. I watch AEW, etc. So this is sort of ironic that, like, when it comes to MMA, I find the Covington gimmick completely useless because if you do not care for the fight he's in, why does it matter what trash talk and dressing up he does? To a degree, this also goes with, like, Conor McGregor. And, like, anybody who uses, like, the sort of gimmick to sell fights. It's, sure, a cool soundbite is cool and whatever, but, like, why do I want to see you fight? Like, this is the thing, is, like, people are, like, keep going, like, well, you know what, there's a bunch of people who hate watch Colby Covington, and that's why it's all worthwhile. Is there? Like, I asked that question very, very, very seriously. I don't know a casual fan that hate watches Covington. I don't know what that is. There are people like me who I watch every card, so it doesn't matter. And there are people who seem to watch because of Colby, but to cheer him on, again, buying into the right-wing shtick, buying into the grift, so to speak. And that's harmful. And you would be better off embracing it as actually, like, a true thing in that case. But if you're like, there's this, I don't know. Like, find me the people that supposedly hate watch a Colby Covington fight. Find me the people that watch Colby Covington wanting him to lose and having no investment in the other guy. Having no like, dude is in a title fight. Like, people are gonna watch it because it's a title fight. We'll probably never actually get the idea of, like, what the number difference is. Honestly, I still go with the theory that, like, part of Colby Covington's case against George Masvidal basically getting dropped is just Dana White agreeing to give him a title shot in exchange for him not going after George. I don't know why, because George just retired, so I don't know. It's a bit weird. But anyways, well, I mean, I guess we got that big fight with Gilbert Burns. I guess that was worth it. But yeah, no, that's all I have to say about Covington. And then with Jake Shields and Nate Marquardt, it's just the big old double fingers because you've got Marquardt in particular. It's like, man is basically a right-wing Christian grifter at this point. Listen to the Bible, whatever. Here's a hot take. Maybe a hot take. Shouldn't be a hot take, but maybe it is. MMA fighters talking about the Bible is inherently weird. These are people that made their living and their fame from doing damage to each other. And to be clear, I'm a fan. I'm not looking down on this as a profession. But when it comes to like how inherent to the Bible is that, kind of not at all. It's like greed and violence, which are, sins according to the Bible. And prize fighters probably shouldn't be used as like Christian spokespeople. I'm just saying. And this also goes for like Andrew Tate with like the Islamic faith too. Like that also is a bit weird. But at least they're trying to glorify like what he's done afterwards, I guess, and like his conservative values and whatever, which are also bull crap. But like, I don't know, it's maybe it's a step above, I guess. And you got Mark, and another thing, Marquardt is also a guy who got busted, I believe, 3 times for PEDs. Also, why did he get busted for nandrolone and not get his win over Ivan Salivary taken away? Justice for Ivan Salivary. There you go. It's just really weird. It's really bizarre. And there's a lovely conversation about whether the Bible is a translation of a translation or whether it's like the Word of God. And it's horrible. I'm just speaking really fast because I don't want to get sucked down that thought rabbit hole again. And then with Jake Shields, you have like the George Floyd jokes that he's pulling out now, which are not funny. And like the funny thing is like people are defending it, being like, well, George Floyd really wasn't a very good person. Let's say I buy that. Actually, let's not even say I do buy that. I do buy that. There's enough stories about and enough like evidence to suggest George Floyd, not a super nice person. But here's the problem. Still got killed by the cops. Still shouldn't have died in the manner that he did. Still shouldn't have died without trial. And most importantly, the jokes aren't funny. Like saying, hey, it's been 3 years since George Floyd died. And wow, it's 3 years sober, I guess. That's it's not really funny. The butt of the punchline there is guy is dead. It's not great. One sec here. I gotta pick something up off the floor. My headset has a microphone that's coming apart, and every so often part of it falls off. I don't use the microphone, so it's not really a problem. Anyways. So you got that, and then and with Shields, like you have like actively calling for like the execution of like gays and trans people. Here's another thing I've never really understood. Why is it people who are involved in like the grappling arts, so be that wrestling, BJJ, sambo, judo, whatever, you're in close proximity with men during like most of your training, possibly with women. You probably roll with women at some point. Would that not be like a bigger problem? It's like I don't get the homophobia and the transphobia that exists within that world. Like to quote a commonly utilized line, BJJ, that's the gayest sport on the planet. It kind of is. Like, guys, it really kind of is. So when you're Jake Shields and Marquardt or whatever, and you are so anti-gay, you might want to look in the mirror. I don't know. Like, it's just weird. Okay, so that finishes up the MMA politics are ridiculous portion of today's TED Talk. Let's move on to the Francis Ngannou contract. This is a little bit more happy. So, I mean, I've talked about this at length. I have nothing new to add. Francis is getting paid off of this. Somebody else is getting paid off this because of the $2 million minimum for an opponent. And he's got the freedom to do the boxing thing. Oh, excuse me. Maybe that leads to a fight with Tyson Fury. Maybe that leads to a fight with Deontay Wilder. Maybe that fails and we end up with like, I don't know, Andy Ruiz or Dillian White or whatever. It'll lead to like some moderate payday in boxing. I have faith in that. Maybe it's not the Joshua Wilder Fury payday. Maybe it's not one of those 3 big fights, but there will be something that occurs here. Something will come in for Francis. He's talking about it being in 2023. And then his PFL debut in 2024. And he's got a brand ambassador job. And Dana White's take on this is just ridiculous. Now, I'm going to say this. Part of Dana White's take makes sense. I am very nervous about what this deal actually means for the PFL. Because Dana White is kind of right. They don't really draw ratings. They don't really draw butts and seats. And it's really, really confusing where they get their money from. Because they are paying out a fair amount in fighter pay. So there is a lot of questions about, like, is this going to work out? But, like, at the same time, if you're the PFL, what are you going to do to make yourself a big player in the MMA stratosphere? What keeps you from just being Bellator? Because nobody wants to go through all this effort to build an MMA promotion and build it up and promote the fighters and all the hard work, the blood, sweat, and tears just to end up as Bellator. No one wants that. So if you're PFL and you want to be something bigger, you want to be an actual rival to the UFC, you want to do some things, and this goes for like one as well, you're going to have to take risks. This is a big risk, but there's a big possible payoff. It does exist. I'm not saying it will work, but like I'm just saying, like, you can't keep doing what, like, PFL had very much plateaued where it was in terms of growth. It had gotten on ESPN Plus. That's cool. It had, drawn in some decent fighters. It actually managed to get some fighters that the UFC was interested in to come over or not go to the UFC. So, like, there was some, but it was plateaued. It was plateaued as a B promotion, and it wasn't going to go above that. If their goal is to go above that, they had to do something like this Ngannou deal. We'll see. But from Ngannou's point of view, like, Dana's whole thing is like, well, he's being risk adverse and he's scared, basically, which is ridiculous. Because I think here's the thing: insert any MMA fighter you want. You can insert Colby Covington if you want. I clearly don't like Colby, but man is not risk adverse. You're in a sport that involves almost guaranteed CT, almost guaranteed knee and back issues, almost guaranteed like destroying your body for not a lot of pay. Because if you look at it realistically, the number of fighters that have translated MMA into life-changing money is basically Conor McGregor, and then like a couple of people who have done the transition to Hollywood. I guess Gina Carano, maybe Randy Couture, Ronda Rousey with WWE, as well as some Hollywood projects that paid her a lot of money, even though she was terrible. That's pretty much the list, right there. That is the list. And I guess Czech Congo's made a fair amount of money off of his like fashion boutique business. But like as a general rule, this is not life-changing money. This is life-changing physical detriment, and you have elected to do it. That's not a risk-adverse mindset, and it's also not risk-adverse to leave the UFC because, let's be honest, the risk of leaving the UFC is that Francis would get nothing. There was that possibility. There was the possibility that no MMA promotion was going to pay him out nearly this much. We know one wouldn't. One wouldn't do it. We know Bellator wouldn't do it. So it was PFL or bust, and he got the job done there. And on top of that, he's risking basically he's going with a big risk that like he can actually draw a big boxing payday. The safe move was to sign with the UFC. But Dana White has to present that in a different light because that would make the UFC look bad. And they do look bad off this. They I mean, and they know they do because they came out. They when the news struck about Francis, they're like, we have all of these fights coming up that none of them had bout agreements signed. None of them. Several of them probably will not happen. Like the Paulo Costa one they announced, which I think was against Ikram Alaskarov, or it was against Magomedov. I forget which. Abus Magomedov or Ikram Alaskarov. I forget which one was which. Probably is not happening. Because Costa's kind of pissed off that they, again, tried to big brother it. And kind of everyone is, honestly. Everyone involved. A lot of them will probably just end up signing because why not? But if I'm Costa, I'm not signing to fight Alaskarov. To be honest, I'm not sure who I'd have to be to sign to fight Alaskarov. Dude is like, I don't know. Maybe he's worth it. Maybe he's worth it. Maybe the Chimaev connection really actually does make it worth taking that fight. I don't know. But, a bunch of false stuff and whatever, which just kind of brings us back to don't believe Dana White. Never believe Dana White. Never, to be clear, actually, I think don't believe a fight promoter. Like, this isn't even an anti-Dana White thing. If the UFC replaced Dana White with somebody else today as head promoter, John Anik, Dave Scholler, whoever it would be, there is apparently an anointed successor for Dana White in the UFC's line of succession, whoever that happens to be. I would not believe them either, because it's a fight promoter's job is to kind of like lie and hype the fight. There are some things that Dana, I think, does specifically do that are bad. We're going to talk about that when we get to Aljamain Sterling. But I wouldn't believe it. I wouldn't believe anything they say. So moving on to the UFC's financials. So the UFC, we know, is a billion-dollar business. It has been that way for, I want to say, since 2018. I believe 2020, obviously, saw a drop because of the pandemic. Obviously, live gate revenue going down. But we have their financials, again, $1 billion. UFC fighters making, depending on your evaluation, 13 to 18% of that is fighter pay. And the UFC's take home is, I believe, $380 million. Something like that. It's a big deal. Like, it's a 38% margin. And people will continue to defend this. I don't know why. Don't really get it. Because here's the thing. Their defenses for this business model are, well, by concentrating the pay in the promotion's hands, we get the best versus the best. No, we don't. Francis Ngannou just walked out the door. They're having a hard time getting Leon Edwards, Colby Covington, which in their opinion is the best of the best at welterweight, to actually fight each other. Some of the best fighters in the world are in Bellator, PFL, ONE, Ryzen. They're having a hard time putting together a title fight between Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic, which in my opinion is not the best versus the best, but it's a big fight that they can't seem to put together because Jones wants more money, Stipe wants more money, and they're not doing it. So the supposed advantages of this whole business structure that keep getting trumpeted aren't actually the thing. Like, UFC cards are getting more and more watered down. They're becoming more and more like boxing cards, which ironically, Dana White crapped on throughout the early 2000s. That the reason the UFC would beat boxing is we were going to have deeper cards that were going to be, you were going to be enthralled from the beginning to the end because we have the best talent in the world on this card, and we are not boxing where it's a 1-2 fight card. Well, it's becoming 1-2 fight cards in a big way. I want to look up the upcoming UFC pay-per-views here real quick. So we got UFC 289, which is the next one. You've got Aldana versus Nunez, Dariush versus Oliveira, and Barrio versus Anders as your third card. That's a 2-fight card. That's a 2-fight card. You have Adam Fugit, Mike Malott on the main card. You have Jasmine Jasudavicius versus Miranda Maverick as the featured prelim. You have, let's see here, people who probably just don't belong in the UFC on this card, like, let's say, Ayman Zahabi, Kyle Nelson, Blake Builder, who probably at some point will be UFC caliber, but he's not now. He should probably still be developing. Diana Belbita and Maria Oliveira, who are fighting each other. Again, not UFC caliber. And be like, oh, well, a bunch of stuff fell apart for this card. Not really. It's only lost 3 fights. Wonderboy Pahea, which never got to a bout agreement stage. Again, another one of those. Hakeem Dawodu versus Lucas Almeida. Good fight, but like not name value. And then Nunez versus Pena, which has been replaced by Nunez versus Aldana. So like, a better fight has taken its place. So you have that. That's a boxing card, 100%. And then if we look at the UFC 290, where are you? Volkanovski versus Yair Rodriguez. Fantastic fight at the top of the card. Moreno Pantoja, Whitaker Duplessis. Okay, 3 great fights. Maybe you're really hyped for Bo Nickel, Tresean Gore. I'm not. And that's not an anti-Bo Nickel thing. That's just, okay, you're fighting Tresean Gore. He's athletic, but not particularly technical in any way. He is a step up, I guess, from Jamie Pickett. So, like, it's not a bad fight. But as a main card fight, no. This is a better card, but like even this is a card that has Shannon Ross versus Jesus Aguilar on it. Why? Christian Rodriguez, Cameron Saman. I know some people are like actually really big on MSP, the Simon kid. I'm not amongst that, and I'm not particularly big on Christian Rodriguez either. So I guess that one, your results, your levels may vary. Marcin Prachnio, Vitor Petrino, Canelo Kirk versus Esteban Rubovic. Again, not fights that really feel like high level fights. They feel like regional fights. And this is what the UFC was supposed to avoid. That's what this great concentration of wealth was supposed to avoid. It's not. So at the end of the day, the UFC's business model does one thing really well. Really well. It maximizes profits for the shareholders who are the people not taking risks. That's the thing. And to be clear, I've said this before, I'll say it again. I have no problem with Dana White getting rich off the UFC. I have no problem with the WME executives getting money from the UFC. They keep it going. Without them, there is no UFC. This is true. But you know who also there is no UFC without? The fighters. I want them to see more fighter pay. There you go. That's simply it. And hang on. Let's do a thought exercise here. What are the business advantages to paying the fighters more? Here are some ideas. I can't prove any of these, but here are some ideas. 1, you get better fighters. Because the more money you put to the fighters, the more they can afford to move their camps, go places. Take Themba Gorimbo, for example. Themba Gorimbo's career has been a completely unstructured fighter who finally took the plunge with $7 in his bank account, came across the States, hooked up with MMA Masters, which is like a B-level gym, and instantly has become notably better. Imagine if everybody with a modicum of athletic ability was paid enough to do that. Imagine that for a moment. The fight improvement quality would go up. You'd probably have a little bit more interest. You'd have fighters that people are not in the millions, not in Conor McGregor numbers. I want to make that clear. I'm not suggesting that like everyone's a Conor McGregor in the wings, but that there might be just, I don't know, an extra couple hundred per card who watch that, making the TV rights, or the media rights in this case, because it's not really TV anymore, more valuable to the UFC, growing the revenue, and perhaps even keeping the profit margin the same, but having a 38% profit margin that is bigger. That's an amazing idea. Wow. Additionally, you'd just have way less bad press. And you'd probably have to spend less money on antitrust lawsuit, legal costs, and also lobbying the government to not do anything. Because the UFC is actually, like, there's considerable payouts here to prevent extension of the Ali Act and all kinds of things from Congress in regards to this. That's costing money. Maybe you could reduce those. Maybe you could reduce the legal fees. Fighters get more. Everybody. I am presenting an idea that like there is a chance that paying the fighters more equals everything being more. That's the irony. And you get better fights. You would get things like Shane Burgos not walking away from the UFC when the UFC clearly did want him. You'd probably still get Francis Ngannou. Like, I will say this. For all the heat I threw at Dana over the Ngannou thing, to be clear, I am throwing that all at the spin Dr. Dana. If I was in charge of Francis Ngannou's negotiations, I would probably go higher than the purported $8 million they offered him. But I would not grant his ability to box. I probably wouldn't grant any of his other demands either. Just on a purely business level. He would still walk. But Shane Burgos wouldn't walk. Other people who have walked for Bellator, PFL, etc. would not have walked. Because they walked purely for financial reasons. And respect. And we would get Stipe Miocic, John Jones made, which probably will do big business. Just with just pay the fighters more. There you go. There's a lot of business, not passion, not fandom me, just pure business reasons. I could see paying fighters more being an absolute positive for the business, bottom line. Just a thought. Also, I forgot to bring out with the Francis Ngannou stuff. The irony that the UFC offered him Brock Lesnar money, but he is not a draw. Just that logic line just it makes me laugh. It gives me great amusement internally. And fans saying anything about this, we don't have buy rates for any of Francis's pay-per-views. I don't think. Let me see. Let me quickly compare here and look at the UFC pay-per-views headlined by Big Francie, which I believe there are only two. I believe it's just 260, 270. Yeah, we have no buy rate for 270. So we don't know. That may have done gangbusters. I'm sure it did not. To be clear, the UFC still trumpets when they get a big deal. And then UFC 260, which is at the Apex Center. Oh my lord! We don't even have a gate for that. So yeah, we got nothing. And then 249, he was the third from the top on the night. We have a 700,000 buy rate, but that was Gaethje Ferguson and Cejudo Cruz. So I don't really chalk that up to him. But yeah, he headlined 2 pay-per-views. We don't have buy rates for either of them. So we don't know. It's a chance that he really actually is not a draw. But then you're calling the UFC stupid for wanting to pay him more money than they paid any other heavyweight other than Brock Lesnar, who was a massive draw, by the way. Hang on. Let's have a look at, because we probably have buy rates for Lesnar's pay-per-views. We probably do. That was pre the ESPN era, where they were able to hide, where they weren't able to hide them in the same ways. So he headlined, looks like maybe 5 pay-per-views. Let's see here. UFC 200, which did over 1 million, with him in the co-main. UFC 141, which he headlined, 750K. UFC 121, which he headlined, did over 1 million. UFC 116 did over 1 million. He headlined that. UFC 100, which he headlined, did 1.6 buy rate. And over 1 million for UFC 91, which he headlined against Randy Couture. So let me get this straight. Dana White fans, Dana White bootlickers here. The UFC was willing to pay Francis Ngannou, in their own words, commensurate to a million buy rate star, but he's not a draw. Explain. Explain. Let's move on to the Aljamain Sterling thing to finish things off here. So simply put, Aljamain Sterling versus Sean O'Malley, in my opinion, is promotional malpractice. First up, you have a 3-month turnaround being proposed for Aljamain. That's doable. People have done that. Like there's been as low as like a week turnaround in some cases. But for a UFC title fight, usually you do not do a 3-month turnaround because it cuts down on preparation time, the ability for the fighters to be healthy, and also your ability to hype the fight. Because the UFC likes to have time to hype up a fight. Instead, you have to hype this up. You have to hype this up while you're hyping up 2 other fights. And it's going to get lost in the shuffle a little bit. I still think it'll do great money because like Sean O'Malley has that appeal, and it's in Boston. Boston will do a big ass gate. I'm not saying that this is going to be a business failure or whatever. I'm just saying is you could make a lot of money off of a UFC in Boston with a longer booked fight, and then you could do this fight later on and have it do good business because Sean O'Malley will do good business. So the 3-month thing is stupid, in my opinion. Not undoable, but it's dumb. It's not maximizing the profit margin. 2, running down your champion is never a good idea. I've never understood why Dana White has this as his playbook. Run down the champion. Run down John Jones. Run down GSP. Run down Anderson Silva. Run down Tyron Woodley, etc. Whatever. He runs down his champions. Why do I want to see a champion that the guy promoting the fight, assuming I have any faith in him, is telling me is a coward, is telling me is a bum, is telling me is afraid, is telling me doesn't want to fight? Why do I want to pay my money to see that? Why? What is the purpose of, what is the master business stroke on this? I've often said this, like, I actually do think back in the day, Dana White was a uniquely, not uniquely in the sense that he was the only one, but he was uniquely suited to building the business. He was great. He was phenomenal at building the UFC. And he got rich off of it. And I hold no problem with that. But what in his spin doctoring actually works these days? What holds up to any scrutiny except from the UFC bootlickers? And note, I don't say fans. I say bootlickers, guys who like literally will like take the UFC's excrement and tell them that it's delicious and shine Dana's boots. That's what I mean. Those guys who are going to watch anyways. You're not selling to those guys. You don't have to motivate those guys. There's nothing to motivate there. You have their money. You have their souls, frankly. Yeah, so running down Aljamain Sterling doesn't really make any sense. And I say this is a guy who's not really a particularly big Aljamain Sterling fan. Like, as a fighter, his title run has been very, very weird. He won the belt via DQ. That's always a bit bizarre. His first title defense was against the guy he'd already beaten, and a guy who has not won since. At the time, him beating Peter Yan, big deal. That's not aging particularly well. Then he fights TJ Dillashaw. TJ is a one-armed man in an ass-kicking contest, and his shoulder falls apart. And then he fights Henry Cejudo off of 2 or 3 years, I forget which, off the couch. And I may be alone on this. I want to make this clear. I still thought Henry Cejudo looked good, but he did not look like Henry Cejudo. He did not look like champion Henry Cejudo. He looked a little slower, a little bit less explosive, a little bit less kind of everything, except for the wrestling. The wrestling was still phenomenal. And that'll be the last thing to go. But he didn't look as powerful. He didn't look as fast. And he didn't look quite as right. Now, he still looks like a top 10, top 5 bantamweight. Don't get me wrong. Still an impressive win. But, like, it's the problem is that, like, on paper, it's like 3 title defenses, all of which have asterisks next to their name. How he got the belt was a bit weird. And also, he's got some just general things as a person that I don't like. But here's the thing. The UFC dislikes him for, I think, 2 reasons, essentially. One, he stood up to them and actually won way back in the day when he went for free agency and actually got paid for the time a fair bit of money. Still not enough, mind you. But, you know, at the time, good money relative to the going rate. And two, like it or not, because maybe it's a racial thing, maybe it's whatever, he has no fan contingency that pushes back. There's a large segment of the UFC fan base that has been always bizarrely willing to crap on a black champion. They did it with Tyron Woodley. And again, I'm not a Woodley fan, but he got more hate than was ever required. They did it with Anderson Silva at various points. They've done it with foreign champions as well. They want someone that they relate to, I guess. And it shows in the promotion a lot of the time. The only real I'm not saying Dana White is racist. I'm saying that there is a undercurrent of what sells to the market. And if you're not that, the UFC, and you don't play ball with the UFC, they will crap on you. People who they can't push back against, those are the only people who can win and not get crapped on by the UFC. There you go. Okay, this was a depressing episode. Thank you for joining me. Check out the links down below, and I will see you next time when hopefully I'm breaking down some really, really awesome fights and we can have a super fun time.